point. These people were absolutely fired, and that leaves the status as follows. If you looked at the 2004 IOM, all studies presented on the side that said that they don't think there's a connection have now been discredited. Not only was the Verstappen study discredited, or at least made suspect by this manipulation charge, but it turns out that the Elizabeth Miller study in England was totally controlled, paid for, influenced. We have all the memos. In fact, at one point they said what we said, which was that England shouldn't study it because they didn't have enough thimerosal, and that the database was no good. In fact, we have a memo from Elizabeth Miller saying, does that mean I have to give back the money? But they went ahead and did the study anyway. The Swedish and Denmark studies, you might say, look independent, but the people on the Swedish and Denmark studies worked, several of them worked for National Immunization Program. They didn't identify themselves as such, but if you search their names, you'll see they work for the National Immunization Program.
They worked for the CDC.
So therefore, there are no studies that have not been discredited on the other side.
Well,
and now all the remaining studies are on our side, and it's fairly obvious. Earth to people who are listening to this, the CDC themselves fired them for manipulating the data. So to those, my colleagues, my beloved colleagues at American Academy of Pediatrics and the local health departments who are relying on the government studies, I can understand why you might possibly rely on government studies over private studies. But you're now relying on government studies that have been discredited, and the people who did them have been fired. It's now time to back off and say, we were fooled too. We love them dearly. They were fooled. Don't support people that have been fired, and don't support studies that have been determined to be discredited.
But unfortunately for our VSD experience, even with all of this amazing restructuring going on, we still have not been able to see the full VSD database because there are lingering effects of what the National Immunization Program did.
Let me talk about the biggest one. The biggest one is there's two halves to the vaccine safety data link, up until the end of the year 2000 and beyond the end of 2000. And it's crucial that we look at the data beyond the year 2000 because that's the data where they've started to withdraw thimerosal. There's still thimerosal in some vaccines, but they have taken it out of some. And the question is it going down? Is the rate of autism and neurodevelopmental disorders going down? We've already seen it going down in the public database, VAERS. We've also seen a change in the rate of new cases in the California data. We already suspect that it's going down in the VSD because that monitor told me that she's studying it and that she hinted that it was already going down. But what did they do to make sure that we couldn't get to that? Since Congress was ordering the VSD from the government and they had to sort of supply it, although you see they dragged their feet, what they did is they let a contract. They paid, and this is not an exaggeration, $195 million to a private company whose job was to keep the VSD, and if they show it to anybody, they lose the $195 million. So the people are fired, but this company doesn't want to show it to us because they like the money. In addition, initially, at least so far, they have denied they even know anything about it. But we have, of course, government contracts are public. We have the government contract that says they have $195 million. It says they have it, says they supply it to CDC on demand.
And so we're left in this situation where a National Immunization Program has been restructured. We were referred to the Research Data Center itself through the National Center for Health Statistics. And the problem with that organization is that they, first of all, have no rules for the VSD because this is a new thing. And so we've tried to work with them. Well, we want to see the VSD. We want to make modifications to our proposal to look at all this new data. And their response really is they don't have any rules. They have proposed rules that were actually formulated before the new 2005 IOM report came out, that were published, but clearly those are not consistent with what the Institute of Medicine was saying the rules should be. And additionally, they've never been even finalized. So we're left hanging where nobody really has the VSD. Nobody's even sure if the VSD database exists. And a significant part of the data, that's the post-2001 data, it's not clear really where the data resides, at least in the way they're communicating. I think we have a pretty good idea from the material we've obtained under the Freedom of Information Act, but specifically, nailing down it's right here, we have it on this computer, that we've never been able to do.
And what they've done is they've given us a few data sets that are sort of like the ones that they destroyed of ours, and by the way, they testified that they did destroy them immediately, but the ones that they gave us back are not the same, because we have some printouts before, they've been modified. Additionally, beyond that, The data center claims they don't have the VSD, and I think they don't. I think all they have is these little modified data sets. And not only that, if they had it, they don't know how to work with it either. So they wouldn't know how to make it either. So and it's also possible that these people who left may have destroyed it as they left. So the whole thing is in limbo. And by the way, if they did that, I mean, there are jails for people to do that. I mean, it's 195 million. I mean, that's a small part of it. The Kaisers have got tens of millions of dollars. This is an amazing piece of government destruction. I mean, we're talking about a database. People don't think of it like a missile or like a ship, but this is the cost of a major cruiser or something. If they sunk the cruiser, they need to go to jail for sinking the cruiser. If they did anything that makes this database, which incidentally has wonderful capability, not just for vaccines and not just the things that we want to study, but if we're open to independent researchers, many, many things could be determined that are now in a nebulous state. And in addition, an interesting thing is we have now published from the VSD a confirmation. So we have enough that we can say, and we've had it peer-reviewed and published in the Maryland Medical Science Monitor, to show that the VSD does indeed confirm what we said it does, what all the other databases say, which is that thimerosal was a major cause of the epidemic, which is, it's getting to be old news. But our other studies were to propose to look at other things that we're not so sure of. Is there an association between certain vaccines and diabetes? Is there an association between vaccines and asthma? Between vaccines actually and obesity, because mercury inhibits leptin, which causes obesity. And they're very worried about this because they keep sending back, what are you looking for? And I feel like sending a message, we know. Even though I can't prove it yet, the reason we know where to look is we've seen their memos. The areas I just told you, I have memos of theirs showing concern that there may be an association. I want to look at those. I'd like to look at the relationship between certain vaccines and future heart attacks, between stroke, Alzheimer's, all sorts of diseases could be looked at in this database. And the United States government paid a fortune for this database, and not only should we be able to look at it, but anybody that wants to should be able to look at it.
So is there any hope of getting the VSD recovered, or do you think at this point that it may not be complete?
It has a lot of hope. We now have, in addition to Congressmen, we now have a senatorial committee looking into this very strongly. I think
in addition, the lawyers are also another avenue. There are so many people. The CDC and the way in which they've acted have offended Institute of Medicine, the lawyers, the parents, the scientists. I mean, there's virtually nobody left on their side except for a few diehard industry spokesman kind of people.
And let me make clear what I mean by the lawyers. This is not just the guys that go out and sue. There is the Vaccine Compensation Act, which is part of the U.S. government, a no-fault act. There are 4,500 children in that act that have a claim of thimerosal causing autism. The U.S. government has asked, since they don't want to have 4,500 different lawyers representing people go out and get information, they have put a couple of lawyers in charge of doing discovery. And they've actually paid them, and they've paid them money to help do the discovery. These people have gone to the U.S. government and said, our clients need to see this. The court says they need to see it, but they're not complying. So it's not that they're insulting some lawyer that's trying to steal money. These are lawyers representing people in U.S. programs, in no-fault U.S. programs, where the U.S. program is paying for the inquiry, but it's being blocked. But I do think that this will not stand. I don't think that the Congress is going to allow $195 million of U.S. money to be spent to block access for anybody, because it's pretty much anybody now. They were allowed to see it, but they're gone. And so there's nobody seeing it. So $195 million to keep a database, do you know how much good we could have done with $195 million? I mean, that's unreal. The CDC's budget is $4 billion a year. That's a significant part of their budget they use and incidentally, it's amazing to me that Congress didn't have to approve the $195 million. But it turns out CDC has a lot of flexibility. In case there was a sudden outbreak of SARS, they can't go to Congress. So they have a lot of money that they can spend without direct congressional approval. They have a lot of discretionary funds. They, working through the NIH, actually found enough discretionary funds to pay $195 million to a private group to hide a database so that nobody can see it.
So what would have to be done to get that data?
Someone has to modify that contract or a court order or a U.S. government order. They don't have the whole $195 million. It's to be paid out as they keep it. So one thing Congress could do is pass a law, you don't get any more unless you show it to us immediately. Another one is just to order it out. I mean, or a federal court judge could order it out. It seems to me they have to obey the order even though they're not in the government. I mean, they're still part of our society. I think they're still under our U.S. laws. So I think it's going to come out, and I think we're going to have access eventually. And the only proviso on that is that it hasn't been destroyed. If it's been destroyed, nobody can bring it back. If any part of it has been damaged or destroyed, then no court can order it to come back. So
and that represents a very real probability at this point, with them being fired, with them being so restructured, that I wouldn't say it's 100%. I wouldn't even say it's probably more than 50%, but maybe 10, 15% chance that the VSD, when those people left, are so angry or so manipulative, they simply eradicated what the government had. It's a very real possibility.
Maybe they were sacrificial lambs for a government.
Oh, the people that have been fired, there's more people need to be fired before this is over.
The people that were fired were the very worst and at the very top. The corruption, the conspiracy goes much, much deeper than those held accountable so far.
Wow. So how in the world do you clean something like this up? I mean, I know the start, but we're not done. I mean, what needs to be done?
Many things are being done. First of all, there's the beginning of
well,
of
we
a,
should.
of a
Well,
investigation by the
well,
Senate.
we're scientists. A better answer is that there are many things happening, and we are scientists. I mean, you can talk to the political people that are doing that. We're helping from the point of view of we're trying to pursue scientific research here, and their CDC has tried to impede that. And so various people, you can interview people in Congress, people in the Vaccine Compensation Act, civil attorneys, even consumer activist groups, people like Environmental Working Group or Jim Moody's, another one, that are trying to open up the government, make government accountable.
How does it feel to be a scientist and be put on the spotlight? I mean, this is just bizarre. It feels like they're trying to force you into a corner and make it.
If I didn't live this, I wouldn't believe the story. They said no further research. Interestingly, that hasn't been followed, fortunately. In the last 3 weeks, there are 3 NIH-sponsored studies that support this. The Brubaker study showing that thimerosal gets into the brain and stays there indefinitely. So in most ways, it's worse than the methylmercury they're comparing it to, even though they want to take one line out of it and say, well, it's different than methylmercury. See, we told you it was different. By the way, it's worse. Oh, we didn't tell you that. Then there are 2 other studies that have been published in the last couple of weeks
that examined the extreme neurotoxicity of thimerosal. What they did was take neurons in tissue culture.
Tell me. I mean, what place at least?
I don't. Okay, this was done out of West Virginia and University of Kentucky. That was one study, and the second study was out of Virginia Tech. And what they did was try to address, well, how low can you go in thimerosal and kill neurons? This is a question that's very pertinent to the idea that the dose makes a poison. In other words, if you don't have enough dose in the vaccines, in this case of mercury, maybe you couldn't cause autism and other kinds of brain damage. And so what they showed was that at 4 nanomolar, that's at 4 nanomolar concentrations, they were able to kill neurons. And
that's 4 billionths of them.
No, it's 4 nanomolar. And to give you an idea of a perspective of what that's like, in the Brubaker study with his monkeys, when he gave doses of vaccine, sort of mimicking the childhood vaccine schedule, adjusted down for their weight, he got 16 parts per billion of just the inorganic mercury in the brain. So that comes out to 80 nanomolar concentration of mercury, assuming that the brain is like water. So this study is more than 10-fold lower than what he saw in the monkeys' brains was causing damage. And to give you an idea of, again, the scientific perspective of that, when you do tissue culture work, everybody recognizes that that's supposed to be a model. It's not a perfect illustration for the brain. So people say maybe 10-fold, 20-fold, even 50-fold higher doses in tissue culture killing neurons may have some implications for physiological systems. What we're seeing now with thimerosal from this article out of Virginia Tech is that at 4 nanomolar, so we're talking more than 10-fold less than what Brubaker was seeing. We're actually off the spectrum the other way. It's so much lower than what the physiological dose was that, I mean, it just illustrates that virtually any thimerosal being administered to infants is too much.
And it also brings up another thing, the Brubaker study, another horror, which is, 1 in 6 of our children now, according to the Autism Alarm, have a neurodevelopmental or behavioral disorder. That means 5 of the 6 are okay. Only the 5 out of the 6 are okay, but they got mercury in their brains and it's staying there indefinitely. So they may not have brain damage, but they've already got a big dose on which the environmental mercury will then work. And this gives them an increased risk of things like cancer, stroke, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, ALS, and all sorts of autoimmune disorders. So they've already got, if you're normal, you can handle mercury. But but only so much. Eventually, we run out of our ability. It's like, you get 10 strikes. These kids already got 4 of them clicked off before they start. Even these are the normals. And of course, we also have this other interesting thing that we've been working with the association between maleness and the sensitivity to mercury, which involves testosterone. And we started looking at the age of puberty, because many of these children who are affected have precocious puberty. They have signs of precocious puberty. But more scary is that the age of puberty in the whole society from 1900 to 1960 went down because the society got better health and better nutrition. But from 1960 to 1990, we didn't have any better health or better nutrition. In fact, we had more McDonald's, and it stayed the same. But about 1991, the magic time when they tripled the amount of thimerosal, the U.S. age for all children of puberty has started to go down significantly. And it just so happens that the people who studied this, they weren't studying mercury at all, but they were just studying the age of puberty, were studying also puberty in Scandinavian countries, where they had little thimerosal and they got it all out. Guess what? Their age of puberty didn't go down. My comment is, my God, what have we done to the entire society with this?
As a school teacher, I look at the students and wonder what is, every year they would get worse and worse coming into my classes, and I couldn't, and now of course I look at it and go, oh my goodness, all these kids are toxic, no wonder they can't look at me.
But the good news is we are not going to be totally destroyed, because we're already seeing it drop off. It is already beginning to come back. If the curve of rapid increase continued on the same curve that it was going up, for whatever reason, we are sure it's thimerosal, but for whatever reason, if it went up for another 10 years, there'd be no society here. It would go up to 1 in 1. There'd be nobody here that wasn't brain damaged. The good news is that since 1999, when they started withdrawing thimerosal, we are seeing in our various databases a rapid drop-off in new cases.
And to sort of clarify that, the first place we saw it was in the VAERS database. And that's actually an amazing database as far as the drop-off occurring, because if you asked me about 6 months ago with conferences like the one here at Autism One and all over the country yelling thimerosal, autism, I would have said, well, I'm sure it's still going up in VAERS. Someday down the road, we're going to actually begin to see the drop-off. But we, like I said, about 6 months ago, went into VAERS and looked, just plotted yearly the number of new cases of autism entered into VAERS. And what we saw was, beginning around 2002, there was a peak, and following that, 2003, 2004, there's been a dramatic drop-off. And now actually in 2005, we sit here and we have data up through March, we see it even further. And it's like almost every single quarter that we look at has less than the one before.
And it's not just autism, which might be influenced by some of the press, which actually would influence it in the opposite direction, obviously. But we're also looking at speech disorders and learning disorders. Everything is dropping off, and all of it started dropping off in 1999 when they started withdrawing.
And let me explain, I said 2000, what that's referring to. The date of entry in VAERS seems to reflect the age of diagnosis. These children, as we know, 3, 4, 5, something like that, is when they get their diagnosis. So the children entering in 2003 and 4 and 5, those are the ones born in 99, 2000, 2001. There's a lag time, because when we looked by date of vaccine administration, that's in real time, what we saw for those was in 1998 there was a peak, and already by 1999, when the recommendation was to remove thimerosal, but that actually didn't fully go into effect for a number of years to get thimerosal-free vaccines in the pipeline, the other part was to delay the hepatitis B vaccine outside the first 6 months of life.
And that happened immediately.
And we saw within 1999 there was already a drop in autism, speech disorders, and mental retardation.
Now, my daughter was born in March of 2000, and she got her Hep B at birth with mercury in it. And a week later, they had the congressional hearing about it, and then they stopped in Utah. I don't know if it was different in Utah or what, but we missed her by 1 week.
Well, the congressional hearing, the person got up and said it's been out for years. But
No,
you
no, no,
understand-
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
This is in 2000. In 2000, the incredible thing that happened in 2000, you're talking in July, right? July 7th, I think it was 2000.
July 7th, then I'm not sure. I just remember the congressional hearing where I first heard about anything to do with mercury was in April of 2000.
Oh, this is even an earlier one. There was a whole series of hearings. The most incredible thing that happened in 2000 was actually in July, if you were watching the hearings. In June, this famous Simpsonwood meeting occurred, and that's the closed-door discussion where Stratton said they were causing all this harm in children, and Dr. Roger Bernier from CDC got up at the end of the meeting and said, you have to consider all of this information as confidential, can't release it to anybody. And in July, Dan Burton held his hearing, and he called Roger Bernier to testify, and he point blank asked him, did the CDC have any evidence that thimerosal was causing harm to any children?
And he perjured himself.
And Roger Bernier said right into the camera with C-SPAN there that we have no evidence at all to suggest any harm from any thimerosal-containing vaccines administered to children. And he was at Simpsonwood, and he had all that data.
And he's the one that said to keep it quiet. And he meant from Congress too, I guess. He meant it was okay to lie. That's perjury, and perjury, he should be fired and he should be jailed.
And as far as the recommendation about your daughter receiving the Hep B at birth, one of the problems was that people didn't fully follow the recommendations. Even though AAP and Public Health Service said that, they issued a press release, but they didn't go out and tell the pediatricians, now this recommendation really is to be followed, we're really trying to work on this. And that's really what's happening now. As we sit here in 2005, almost June 2005, we're still administering in this country full-dose thimerosal-containing vaccines, in large part because American Academy of Pediatrics and CDC, through the U.S. Public Health Service, has not gone out and really done their job. They have not enforced that recommendation. And as a matter of fact, they've even, in a certain sense, they've withdrawn it. The influenza vaccine has thimerosal in it.
Full dose.
Full dose, and it had it last year. And last year is when they recommended that all children are supposed to get 3 influenza shots during the first 18 months of life. So the effect is they've reintroduced it, and we've actually now gone around on a state-by-state basis presenting the scientific evidence to the state legislatures in support of bills to ban thimerosal. And what we've seen is that CDC, American Academy of Pediatrics, even people from the American Medical Association are coming and testifying against the bills. They're actually advocating the ongoing use of thimerosal in U.S. vaccines.
And that doesn't make any sense, because even if you don't believe that thimerosal caused the epidemic, which is the evidence is overwhelming, there's no harm in withdrawing it. It was their own recommendation to withdraw it. They said it was prudent. In addition, they're trying to imply that this is causing people not to take the vaccine. Well, obviously, people being not confident is helping the vaccine uptake go down. But you know how you fix it? You simply make a law so that the pediatrician isn't reading the package insert and the mother isn't reading them. It's hard to read them and they get mixed up. If you want to restore confidence, what you do is you make a law and you say, in this state, you don't have to read the inserts. I guarantee there's no thimerosal beyond trace because we made it illegal. And that's all we ask for in the law. And we even suggest exceptions. We allow trace because they say they can't make all the vaccines without trace. We allow emergencies in case there's an attack. They can put it back in. With all those allowances, they're still against it. And you know why they're against it? Because they might be sued for what they've done in the past. No one's suing them. It's the manufacturer. They act as if they work for the manufacturer. These are our government employees. These are our state people. They should not care one way or the other whether they get. I don't know if they can be sued for it or not, but it doesn't make any difference. Our job as scientists, our job as federal employees, our job as state employees is to help our children. And so the idea that we're going to keep it in to protect the manufacturers from suit is totally immoral and totally ridiculous. There's no way in this world that anybody should oppose it. If you don't believe it causes, then you just say it's unnecessary, but we'll let you go ahead and do it because it'll restore confidence. And yet they vehemently oppose it.
And the experience has been, usually it comes up in the state legislature, and the other side sort of laughs. Thimerosal has been out, we've heard, 99. It was never in any vaccines to begin with, all these stupid statements.
And then we say, humor us. But then when they find out it's going to pass.
And the committees start considering it, and it usually starts moving forward. These people then go, oh my God, this is really going to happen, and they go look on their shelves, and they see they're administering thimerosal to these children on a daily basis. And then they realize, we're going to have enough time giving vaccines to our children, because so many of them still have thimerosal. And that's when they come up with these arguments where they're diabolically opposed. We can't remove it. We can't vaccinate our children unless we give them thimerosal.
And then what happens is it gets passed unanimously usually. And then it's already been passed in 3 states, several more will. But those that didn't, most of them, what happened is it gets passed in one place unanimously, and they use a parliamentary trick that requires only one person who they obviously have a lot of influence with when they don't bring it up in the other house or they put it off in a committee or whatever. Otherwise, it would have been passed in over half the states in the country already. And those that they've put it off on, they're going to get passed next year. I mean,
parents are really mad. If you've ever been to one of these, it's one of the worst experiences I've personally ever been through, to see people who publicly made all these statements. In the case, we've even been to hearings where Neil Halsey, who was the original person way back in '99, who did all this work and added up how much mercury and said, we got to get this out and we got to tell people about it. Neil Halsey came to our own Maryland State House and said that the Maryland bill to ban thimerosal was not appropriate, that we have to keep administering thimerosal to children.
We keep reading their internal memos which say the Geiers are the leaders of the anti-vaccine movement. Excuse me, they're hurting the vaccine program. We're trying to save it by restoring confidence. We are not anti-vaccine. We've published all over the place about maintaining polio vaccine and other vaccines. It's ridiculous for them to do that. If there's any damage to the vaccine program, it comes from their being incompetent and their malfeasance, not from anything that we've done. Since when did the truth ever hurt anybody? And we go everywhere, as you know, if you've been where we've been, we always recommend vaccines. We want decent vaccines and we want honest answers.